Please welcome Sergeant David Hill.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for turning out today. I like my home in Nevada. I love it, but I also love Chattanooga. I was drafted by Charlie Hobbs and the boys into 203, and it's an honor. Generally, every senior commander issues what they call the sense of the commander. So if subordinate leaders are cut off, they have no communications, or they're sporadic, or the tempo of the battle is just too fast for command and control from the rear. It's got to be done from the man who's at the sharpest point of the spear. That is your company level commanders on up. Inspiration for that and education for that starts someplace like West Point. In Gary's case, it started at University of Tennessee, ROTC program. But I'm reminded of General Douglas MacArthur's, one of the few generals of the Army, and he made his farewell speech to the cadets at West Point for the last time. His words were simple. They were straightforward. They were American. He said, one thing you remember when you do your duties and when you leave this earth: duty, honor, country. Larry Taylor lived by that message. If I might show a little pride, the fact that I too am a member, like Larry, of an alum, I'll call it, of the Big Red One. We used to say, if you got to be one, be a Big Red One. Master Sergeant Petrie reminded me that of our conversation in Washington, D.C., and he, like a lot of others, asked us, well, just exactly how did you hold on to Larry's ship? You know, what'd you do? How'd you grab it? And I said, well, firstly, very tightly. There is no doubt somewhere in the inventory, if it's still flying, a AH-1G Cobra helicopter with 4 distinct sets of fingerprints in the aluminum. So those are ours, and we'll take no credit for them unless they match them to our current fingerprints. For the Big Red One, starting World War I in the trenches, ending most recently in the Korengal Valley or the Hindu Kush of Afghanistan, the Big Red One was always the first. As Stephen Ambrose says, of course, they're the first. They're always there with the most when it's most needed. When we arrived in Vietnam, our base camp at Zion, which is 2nd Brigade headquarters, of which Mike Holden was a member at the same time as Larry and I. He was in the infantry. He had the tough job. We'd get in every few days, not him. So a tribute to line infantry. Those are the backbone of any infantry division. We walked under a archway made out of white paint. We didn't know it at the time, but we would have to live by that ethos. And these are the guidelines, I think, for every 1st Division soldier, is a guiding light, what you look to, particularly when the things are tough and things are going south on you. And your plan is falling apart, as they often do with the very first bullet that is fired. And it read, no mission too difficult, no sacrifice too great, duty first. Quite clear, quite simple. Larry Taylor had his own motto, leave no man behind. And he never did. For him, it meant don't leave him on the ground. And he got us out of there in a most unusual way. I'm sure you know that story. And I don't have time to tell it to you, but I sure would be glad to steer you on that. For Larry Taylor, when he found that he had no relieving fire team, 2 more Cobras to take his place so he could go refuel and come back into the fight, and he had no Huey to pick us up. There was no confusion, no lack of clarity. He knew what he was to do as a senior on-scene commander. There was never any question, never any hesitation, and never any regrets afterwards, regardless of any consequences. Simply, he would not leave our 4 Rangers, my 3 teammates and myself, on the ground out of ammunition, with the enemy kept at bay only when he himself had ammunition, rockets, and miniguns. He just wouldn't do that. We started out as part of D Troop. We were one of them. They never figured we left, even though we moved to a different base camp. So the Cobra's extremely low on fuel. They're out of ammunition, or almost so. And we're still encircled. Well, there's guidance for that as well when things aren't working as you planned. And in the words of, at that time, Lieutenant Colonel Hal Moore, 1st Air Cavalry Division, 1st and 7th Cavalry, the namesake for Custer's cavalry, he said, I'm not going to be Custer. My men are not going to be Custer's men. And he said, for the commander, there is always one more thing you can do to alter the situation you're facing and turn it in your direction. And after that, one more thing. You never stop thinking. He knew we were going to keep trying, and he'd do no less than to get us out of there somehow. Simple words, but meaningful words. No mission too difficult. No sacrifice too great. Duty first. That's all the general guidance one needs. President Abraham Lincoln quite modestly said, after his speech at the Gettysburg National Cemetery after the great battle, both sides lost many soldiers. He started off and said, the world will little note nor long remember our words spoken here today. He was, of course, wrong about that. We all learned about that in school, and still should. But for Larry Taylor and what he did and the action he undertook and successfully carried off in 18 June 1968, we ought to put the reciprocal on that. In the case of Larry Taylor, collectively, as a troop commander, as a teacher, as a political officer, generally in your life and your neighbors, and talking to your, particularly raising your kids, raising your grandchildren. My 4-month-old grandson Teddy is here today with his dad Ian, who is a Navy veteran. But for Larry Taylor, let's do it this way. The world will thoroughly note his courageous and dedicated actions, and will long remember what he did on the night of 18 June 1968. And that's up to me and you. Thank you.